Hey guys, Steve here from Top Guns out of Terre Haute, Indiana, and I've got a really special guest who has arguably fired a bigger gun than any of us have fired. And I'm here with Sam Morgan, and Sam is the father to Sam Morgan, who recently opened up the Climbing Cafe. Sam, I don't know, are you junior or not junior?
I'm the junior.
You're a junior, so you're the third.
The third.
All right, so Sam the third opened along with his wife, who is, and both of them are also veterans, opened up the Climbing Cafe just here on the other side of the building, and phenomenal food and just a really cool facility. And so while I'm there for their ribbon cutting, I had the opportunity to meet Sam's dad, and I got to talking to him, who happens to be the gentleman next to me, so Sam Morgan Jr., and get to talking to him and get to hearing some of his story. I was like, wow, we've got to tell this story because it's really kind of a cool story, some of the stuff that he has seen. So if you would start off by telling us a little bit about your Air Force experience. And you have not only been deployed on the ground and have engaged, now this is in Vietnam that you served, but you've also served throughout most of Vietnam as a pilot as well and engaged quite a bit there. So if you would, tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your experiences.
Okay. I was in the Air Force 30 years. I flew fighters, F-100s, F-105s, A-10s, and I also flew the L-19. I have 150 combat missions, of which 100 of them were in the F-105 over North Vietnam. I came out with 2 Silver Stars, 4 Distinguished Flying Cross, and 13 Air Medals. And I thought one of the Silver Stars should have been a bit higher, but when you're the only guy out of 16 that reaches the target and lives, there's just nobody to tell your story. So the combat missions, I was there in 62 on the Mekong Delta south of Saigon with a Chinese Ranger company on the ground. And I had an L-19, and we would fly around in the L-19 at treetop level to draw fire. That was the bait. And then we'd go back and get probably 100 guys and go back and kill whoever took a shot at us.
Tell us a little bit about the L-19, if you would.
It was a single-engine propeller airplane, much like a Piper Cub. Carried the guy in the front and the guy in the back. And I had never flown it before. And I got down to Saigon, and they said, go across the airfield, and they want to give you an L-19. And I get over there, and there's a Vietnamese Army sergeant who speaks no English. I said, you got a tech order? He said, no. I said, got a map? No. He said, I'll help you start it, in broken English. And then he said, go south till you see a fork in the river, then look over to the right and you'll look for a hole in the jungle. There's an airfield there. So I thought, well, I got enough fuel that if I don't find the airfield, I can come back to Saigon. But I found that, and it was an exciting time. I remember spotting mortars on Thanksgiving in 62. And flew till it got dark, and this is an airplane I maybe had 30 hours in. So now I'm going back to an unlighted jungle strip to land down between the trees using only the landing lights. And it took 2 passes to get it on the ground that time. And then I've stood on the rice paddy banks firing a Thompson, a Schmeitzer, an M2, lots of ammo going both ways. I've dragged corpse out of the rice paddies. I remember the night some nut job heaved a grenade down the alley in Cantho. And when I got down there, I heard the explosion. There was a toddler lying on the ground. 2 girls were dead, 2 GIs were dead. And I picked up this little boy. And I could hold him like this, and the only way you could tell he was alive was his mouth was still briefly opening and closing. So I went to the street, told the taxi cab driver we're going to the hospital, and he said he didn't want to get involved. And I had a gun, and I said, you're involved. And we got in the back of the taxi, and at gunpoint, he went to the hospital, and I don't know what happened to the little boy. I just dropped him off, and that was it. And then in 64 and 65, I was stationed in Japan, but I was temporary duty to Thailand, and we were bombing Laos and North Vietnam. And then in 65, I'd had 5 years in the theater, and the personnel guy said nobody stays over 5 years. So I had to leave, go back to Kansas, where I was an instructor in the F-105. And then in 67, I managed to get back over there and flew 100 missions over North Vietnam in the F-105. And as an experienced guy, I got to lead the strike forces. And we would put together 16 F-105s. We flew together so the electronic jammers could handle the big missiles. And a typical strike was like the Anbay storage area. I'm number 4 in the lead flight. 16 of us. We're coming across north of Hanoi. The big missiles are heavy in the air. There's dozens airborne. They're about the size of a utility pole. They're going 1,800 miles an hour, and they got a 300-pound bomb warhead. You see them come off the ground when the booster rocket fires. It falls off, and then the sustainer rocket fires, and you see this ball of fire coming up and coming up fast. And you're calling it out, and you're watching it, and if it looks like it's got your name on it, it'll look like a flaming bowling ball. The fire will be all the way around it. You push over hard, 3 or 4 negative G's, and get the missile going with you down, and then you pull back up into the formation. I called one at 10 o'clock, and it was coming up fast, and I thought it was me, but I maneuvered enough to see it wasn't changing. So I'm in the formation that's going to pass under me. I roll left, see it go under me, and roll right, and it hit the guy right next to me. And it was an enormous fireball. The F-105 was over 60 feet long, and the fireball of that missile was bigger than the airplane. And it blew this guy named Hagerman clean out of the sky. We went on in, rolled in. Most of my dive bomb runs were 60 degrees with a Mach 1 bomb release and a 10G pull. So you're coming from 18,000 feet down to 6,000 feet. You're doing almost 800 miles an hour at bomb release at 6,000 feet. The bombs don't just fall off, they're explosive charges in the pylons for each bomb. When you hit the button, you feel these charges going off and blowing the bombs off the airplane. And then you go full backstick, as hard as you can pull. And right away you black out. Your eyes are open, you're alive and well, but you see nothing but black. So you kind of gauge when you're getting close to the horizon, let off the back pressure, your vision comes back, make a hard turn so you can see your bombs hit, then lower the nose half a G, now you're accelerating out, and you're looking for somewhere between 800 and 900 miles an hour. And while you're doing that, you're turning the switches off for the bombs, and you're resetting the switches for guns. And you've picked out these guys that were shooting at you on the way in, and now you're going back to even the score. And I was making, after this mission where Hagerman got blown out of the air, I was going to get the gun sight on the east side of Guillaume Airfield. We weren't allowed to hit Guillaume because it was not on the target list, so you would go to jail for hitting Guillaume, but you could shoot the guns around it. So I rolled in at Mach 1.2 from 6,000 feet. The engine's going full power, the afterburner's going full power. The gun could fire 100 rounds a second, a 20 millimeter, and I was going to empty the gun. But in 10 seconds, she covered over a mile. So the gun was going, the engine's blasting, everything's roaring. And at that moment, the gun gases, compressor stalled the engine, failed the air turbine motor, killed the AC electrics, killed the utility hydraulic system. I thought I was dead, because the bird pitched up hard left and came around, and now I'm over Hanoi, subsonic, with what I thought was a crippled airplane. But it turned out that it was just a compressor stall. I got everything reset, and unfortunately I'd made a call that I was hit. So when I ended up on the tanker, all the other guys were saying, "What are you doing here? I thought we left you up there." So that was one of the missions. Another one, I was a strike force leader on the Thynelian Steelworks on the west side of Hanoi. Afternoon mission coming out of Laos, 16 F-105s in the strike force, 8 F-4s behind us, 4 F-105 Wild Weasels out and low. I knew the MiGs were going to eat us alive. The President Johnson had set up a 25-mile buffer zone that we could not go into along the Chinese border. And the MiGs would sit up high in the buffer zone. We knew they were there. We couldn't go get them. And they'd come out supersonic, and we had to deal with them. I asked if I could go 4 flights of 4, every man for himself, and I was told no. The tactics were written in blood. I wouldn't change them. So here we are now, turning Thud Ridge in North Vietnam, and it was called Thud Ridge. They called our airplane the Thud because that's the sound it made when it hit the ground. And 28 of them had already been shot down over Thud Ridge. So I'm turning Thud Ridge. One of the F-4s behind us called MiG-21s coming out of the buffer zone. I called burners now. We're going to race them to the target. We were only 3 minutes from the target. Right away, one of the F-4s was hit, and those guys went down. I'm in the dive. I'm up over 800 miles an hour now, and the guy next to me took a heat seeker hit, and he went down. The guys with cluster bombs must have jettisoned the bomb because one of the weasels is now yelling like a mashed cat that the backseaters did. He'd hit a bomb in flight, and it blew up on the canopy and killed the guy in the back seat. Now I'm on the deck running over 800 miles an hour at treetop level. And I see the sun on the water under the bridge at Thynelian Steelworks. So full back stick, max power, and I'm going through 20,000 feet like a rocket. Rolled over, inverted, and I looked down. At this time, I thought I was by myself. I look down and I see hundreds of muzzle flashes. And I know at that moment I'm the only guy in the sky, and these guys are all going to do it. So at about 26,000 feet, I nosed over, 60-degree dive, still max power on the engine, bombs are ready, and I'm coming down, and there's so many tracers. It looked like I was coming down through a tunnel of fire. The bird was totally surrounded by tracer ammo. And I figured that I was so fast the shockwave must be pushing the bullets away. But 6,000 feet, bomb release, full back stick, wham, cannon shell that hits the left wing. Rolls the airplane so hard it tumbles all the gyros. And now I'm pulling around and shoot, I pass another F-105. My wingman was still with me. And this was his first mission in North Vietnam. He was the 3rd wing commander since I had been there, and I'd only been there 4 months. The other 3 got shot down. And this guy's in his 50s. He's never been in North Vietnam before. And it must have been a really exciting mission for him because we near collided because the hit in the wing rolled my bird so fast.
Your wing got hit?
Took a 57 millimeter in the left wing. But it didn't. It still flew. So now we're off the target and we're heading back into Laos. And I looked for a tanker and found a tanker, and we refueled. And then went back into North Vietnam. And we're orbiting Thud Ridge, trying to lure those MiGs back down. And I landed that night. We were up way late. We must have been up 7 or 8 hours on that mission because we refueled 3 times. And I land and taxi in. Nobody meets me, and I thought, oh, this doesn't look good. I go to intelligence with the nobody's there. I thought, wow, they must be really angry at me. I've left 3 guys on the ground. 1 guy came back dead, and only 2 of the airplanes got to the target. This is not a good day. What I didn't know was my wingman was in the process of dying. The mission was more than his body could handle, I guess, and they were all over dealing with him. And he died a week or so later of just, I guess, scared.
Is this the guy that was 50 years old?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he died of natural causes. So I was really the only guy that got to the target and lived. And there were other missions. I remember being the strike force leader to bomb the Kep airfield and coming over. Beautiful day, coming up the Gulf of Tonkin early in the morning. The sun was bright, and as we turned, there's an island in the water. We call it the Elephant's Ear because it looked like an elephant's ear. Turned the Elephant's Ear with 16 F-105s, and the flak was absolute thick. There was no way you could get through the cloud. But we headed straight into it. The guys in the back of the formation were starting to come on the radio and saying, "You're not really going into that, are you?" And what I wanted to do was wait till the last second and use the afterburners to get over the flak, because they couldn't reset the fuses fast enough if I waited. So I call burners now. We went max power on the engines, and all 16 of us pulled up. And as we rolled in, before we rolled in on the airfield, 13 of the 16 birds were hit. But only one of them was shot down, and that was Bill Jones. I'm now off the target since I was the lead. I was the first guy in. Good bombs. And I'm heading out for the water because we felt if you could get to the water, no matter what they hit you with, you could probably survive it. You wouldn't go to jail anyhow. And I heard that Bill was in the parachute, and one of the guys called, they're shooting at him in the parachute. And I thought, I gotta go back. So I turned around and went back. I armed the gun up, and I'm turning Hanoi, and they said, no, that's a chaff pack out of his ejection seat. They weren't shooting at him. So I turned around, kept it supersonic, and headed back out over the water. And Bill was KIA that day. We never found any more about him. So those are the missions. We flew 100 of those. It was one of those things. If it was a scary mission, it was going to be 16 guys. A single-seat airplane, we flew 16 of them together, and the 16 of us would meet in the room, and we knew that in 4 or 5 hours, when we got back, at least one of us wouldn't be there. 3 was the most I saw lost out of a single strike. But then I left in '68 with 100 missions. That's what you flew, and then they said, you're through, you're leaving. And then I wanted to go back, and I kept trying to go back. And finally they said, you're going back, but you're going back in an F4. So I was there for a year in the F4, and I was there when the Mayaguez was taken by the Cambodians. And I was over the Mayaguez while we were taking it back in an F4, but I didn't drop, because we already had the Marines on the beach, and you didn't know where they were and where they weren't. So you couldn't drop because you didn't want to kill a friendly. And that's pretty much my story.
So tell us a little bit about, and we'll have a picture up on the screen as you're doing this. Tell us about each plane that you flew and the ordnance that plane carried.
The F-100 and the F-105 are pretty much alike. The 105 was a follow-on to the 100. Both of them had a turbojet engine. It would be a big turbine engine. The 105, the turbine would put out 18,000 pounds of thrust. And then you had an afterburner tacked on the back of that, which was really just dumping fuel into the tailpipe and lighting in. But you'd pick up another 8,000 pounds of thrust. So you had 24,000 pounds. And then the 105 had water injection, so you could pick up another 2,000 on takeoff. So it would weigh about 50,000 pounds, and you had 26,000 pounds of push to get it airborne. Not a big wing, so you had to get it up to almost 200 miles an hour to get it airborne. And it was built as a nuclear penetrator. And I remember one night where the alarm went off. We had a 1.1 megaton weapon inside the airplane, a hydrogen bomb. And you knew the missions were really one-way missions. You planned them so you got back with maybe 400 pounds of fuel. That would last maybe 5 minutes at the most. And you usually sat on the ground waiting with the engine running, waiting on the codes to release the nuclear weapons. So you knew when you took off, you weren't coming back. And it was a dark, stormy night. It was raining like gangbusters. It must have been 2 in the morning. It seemed like, and I'm on the end of the runway, and if I got the 2 code words, I was going to take off and kill 1 million people. And the code words didn't come. But those are tense moments. You're sitting in the rain, engines running, canopies closed, the guard's standing by the gate. If he pulls that gate open and you get the 2 words, it's burners, and off you go into the dark.
Mm.
And so...
What, now, on an average mission, what type of ordnance would you have on that?
Before they started using the big missiles, a normal load would be 8 750-pound bombs, or 2 3,000-pound bombs, and 1,000 rounds of 20 millimeter ammo. But when the big SA-2 missiles started being used against us, they took the 2 outboard bombs off and put electronic jamming pods on. And I would have rather had the bombs and not the pods, but they don't tell you what you can do, they tell you what you will do.
And then you also flew the Warthog, the A-10 Warthog, a little bit?
Not much. I was in England then as a maintenance officer, and I wasn't happy not flying. So I sent in a message telling them how valuable it'd be if the maintenance officer also flew the airplane. So I went up to Lakenheath and got a ride in the RF-4 so I could get landing current, and then just started flying the A-10. It's a good airplane.
So your son, Sam, that is what he flew during his time in the military. So do you know much about the ordnance that one carries?
Well, I know it was a great gun. That 30 millimeter cannon fired like a laser. And it was really magic because you'd start the thing firing, and usually with the 20 millimeters, when you quit firing, the gun's spinning so fast, a dozen or so rounds go on past the barrel. But the A-10 would stop the barrel, back it up, unload the rounds that didn't fire, and put it back in the can.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the round was about 1 foot long, and it had a depleted uranium spike in the middle of it, so when it hit something hard, it just turned into heat and it would blow right through the turret of a tank.
That's amazing.
So, but the A-10, as soon as you got into battle and started turning, you were at 280 knots, and that's where you were going to stay. You weren't going to go very fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not happy in the target area until I could get it up over 800.
Interesting.
To me, if I could get to 6,000 feet and over 800 knots, I felt safe.
And then the 2 other things I want to mention. One is you're 84 years old currently.
83 and a half.
83 and a half, all right. And you were in your 30s, roughly, during your years?
20s and 30s.
20s and 30s, okay. And you also had a mission you mentioned where you were on the ground and you were armed with as we've heard it called a Tommy gun or Thompson machine gun.
Thompson, yeah.
And you mentioned the issue with that was...
Well, first, it was in the jungle. It was the southernmost point you could be in Vietnam and still be in Vietnam. There was a village called Cam Mau, and there was a dirt strip, and I had an L-19 flying out of that. But I'd go out with the Ranger company, and I carried a Thompson and a couple grenades. It was kind of fun to run around, but I found out the Thompson is really not a very good weapon. One, it won't shoot far enough you got to be standing next to somebody to shoot them. And then it's very heavy. And running through the jungle carrying a Thompson and 75 rounds in 5 clips is really hard to do. So I traded the Thompson for a Schmeitzer, a 9 millimeter, and it was kind of interesting. It's full automatic or nothing. But again, it just didn't shoot far enough. So I finally settled on an M2 carbine as the weapon I carried most of the time in the jungle. But it was interesting. I saw guys, the AR rifles were then M14s, I think they called them. And some of the Vietnamese had them. and it had the small caliber round. And I remember that a guy, they came in and shot up they thought they had the house I was in. They shot up the house next door, killed a bunch of women. And so the next morning, I got with a Vietnamese commander, and we took off in the L-19, and all we did was fly in ever bigger circle around Kamau until a guy came running out, and I remember I'm looking right at him, and he's pointing a rifle right at me, and I saw the rifle jump, and I thought, ooh, but it missed. So we went back and got 100 Rangers in plastic boats with outboard motors and went up the canal. And I don't know why these guys waited on us, but they came running out of this house. And the first one was running, and one of the guys with an M14 shot him, and it hit right under the left jaw. And he never completed the step he was taking. Didn't blow his head off or anything, just a small hole, and he dropped like a rock. And then the rest of them took off across the rice paddy, and it's about not quite waist deep. So they're running and firing back at us. We're running and firing at them, and that's when I could see my Thompson just splashing in the water behind them. I could not reach them. And I ran for maybe 100 yards in the water, and I thought, I can't do this any longer. Anybody that's tried to run in water is going to find out the hard way. You're not going to run very fast. And then I tripped over, and there was a dead guy. And he was Vietnamese, and it was a young kid. And I dragged him out of the water up on the bank. And that was pretty much the end of it. We were separated, and the firefight was over. And I remember the day they gave us Claymore mines. And nobody had ever seen a Claymore mine. And it's curved like a radar antenna. And we were talking about, do you point the curve this way or that way? And you fire it with what looks like a flashlight. So we set up a bunch of cardboard in the rice paddy, and then got one of the guys to duck underwater and fire it. And we could see where all the ball bearings hit the cardboard. You ask about weapons load. When we flew the 16 birds, the second 4 had what were called CBUs, or cluster bomb units. And they carried 5 cans, and each can carried 480 grenades. So each airplane had 2,000 grenades on it, of which some of them were instantaneous and some of them were time delays up to 36 hours. You dropped the can, it looked like a bomb, but as it's going down, the cord would fire and it would open up as a clamshell, and you see all these balls come out of it spinning, and they start spreading out. And then when they hit the ground, anybody above ground is dead. And so the gunners would see those things coming and hopefully quit shooting while the rest of the guys were coming down on the dive bomb runs. But the CBU is a vicious weapon. I don't think you can use them anymore. Because even if you don't kill a guy, he's going to die. He's leaking and all over.
There's a something pulled up on the screen over there. Does that mean anything to you?
Oh, the scorpions?
Tell us about that.
It was when they were spraying the rivers with the canals on Vietnam with defoliant. They had the Higgins
with what?
boats. Defoliant.
What is that?
Agent Orange.
Okay, all right.
Kills all the vegetation. We had the old Higgins boats, the landing craft from World War II. Had the front deck welded closed. Had a 20 millimeter cannon on the front, 250s on each side, and a mezzanine on top, and we'd spread riflemen across the top. And this was a night soiree down the canal, and there's just, the guns are blazing all night long, it seemed like, just hosing. And the idea was that we would get all the opposition taken care of, and 123s were going to come over at daybreak at treetop level, spraying Agent Orange up and down the canals. So all this shooting's going on, and I'm in the front boat just admiring all that's going on. And we turned around in the river for some reason. I have no idea why. It's pitch dark. Nobody has a light on. We're heading up the river now, and I'm thinking, my gosh, there's 12 guys coming down the river in boats just like ours. And the 20 millimeter in the front was a turret. Must have been off of an old Navy ship. I knew we were going to hit another boat. So I backed up against the turret, and sure enough, seconds later, we hit a boat head on. And both of the boats went up in the air, and then one fell on one bank and one fell on the other bank. And the riflemen that were on the top looked like a bunch of worms crawling around in the mud. So I thought, uh-oh, we've been hosing these guys down all night long, and now I'm on the bank. So I ran into the jungle. I must have run a mile into the jungle. And I found a shed full of peanuts. So I crawled down in the bottom of these peanuts and spent the whole night scared to death somebody was going to come shoot me. And all through the night I could hear all this rustling. And the next morning when it finally got daybreak and I crawled out, I found there were about as many scorpions in the peanuts as there were peanuts.
Oh, wow.
The whole thing was just loaded with scorpion, and I never got stung, but it was. And then I came back out of the jungle. I could hear the activity down by the river, so I went down there, and they were still trying to pull those boats out. But we had plenty of firepower now, and the 123s were coming over, and Agent Orange was raining down on everybody at that point.
Do either of you guys have any questions, or if I missed anything that you can think of? Good. All right. Well, I want to thank you, one, for your service. I don't know that I've had an opportunity to speak to anybody that has been through and seen as much as what you have, and two, for sharing your story with us. That's the story is amazing, but to have an opportunity to sit and speak with somebody who has been there and experienced it firsthand, this is a once-in-a-lifetime experience for me, just to be able to speak to somebody who has done that. So on behalf of all of us, thank you for your service and your dedication to securing our freedom here in the United States.
I might add, it's interesting. When I got back, all the aggro about Vietnam was going on. And I was told when I got back at the base in Kansas, don't go off base in uniform. And this is the first time anyone's asked me to tell these stories. So I didn't know whether anybody wanted to listen to them or not. But anyhow, thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it.